Comrades, in this video we will be giving answer to Taimur Rehman of Pakistan, who has put out a video titled "Why I'm Not a Trotskyist." In this video he claims that at one time in his youth he was associated with the Trotskyist party in US, Socialist Workers Party, the SWP, and after reading Trotsky and about Trotsky, he has turned against Trotskyism. He has found Trotskyism to be not applicable to revolutions, especially those in the backward countries like India and Pakistan. He doesn't say specifically in this video to which current he belongs to, but obviously he belongs to Stalinism, and he is attacking Trotskyism from Stalin's point of view. He is not innovating any new argument to attack on Trotsky. In fact, he is repeating by rote the old arguments repeated 100 times by uh, Monty Johnstone, Harpal Brar, Grover Furr, etc. etc. Now he is repeating those arguments. The Trotskyists have given befitting replies to those arguments, but either Professor Rehman has not gone through those answers, those replies, or he is feigning ignorance to them. Let us take his arguments one by one. He says that the theory of permanent revolution put out by Leon Trotsky can be divided broadly in three parts. First, which he places at number 3, and then he says that it should have been placed at number 1. That is Trotsky's opposition to Stalinism, that is bureaucratic degeneration of Soviet Union. Number 1. Number 2, he says Trotsky's opposition to two-stage theory of revolution. And third, Trotsky's opposition to the idea of socialism in one country. In fact, he should not have put out the video in this way. He should have criticized all these parts, according to him, one by one, and should have dealt with separately, so that his viewers must have had a better idea of whatever he wanted to say. Let us take up his first argument. I think we must take up, first of all, the socialism in one country. That is the main bone of contention between Leon Trotsky, the left opposition under him, and the Stalinists. What is the socialism in one country? First of all, we must understand it. What does it represent? What does the idea of socialism in one country represent? Let us be, first of all, clear on that, because Professor Rehman has created a lot of fog on that, and like all Stalinists, they have intermingled several issues on that. Socialism in one country is altogether different from revolution in one country, socialist revolution in one country. First of all, we want to say that Leon Trotsky is not against the idea of a socialist revolution in one country. On the contrary, Leon Trotsky is the first and foremost leader among Russian revolutionaries who first of all propounded the idea that the Russian proletariat, through a socialist revolution, would come to power in Russia even before European proletariat. That means even before the proletariat of developed countries in Western Europe, in the West, would come to power. Before that, Russian proletariat would come to power in Russia. So, Leon Trotsky is arguing in favor of a socialist revolution in one country, Russia. So to say that Leon Trotsky is not in favor of a revolution in one country, a proletarian revolution in one country, is an absurdity. Leon Trotsky, in fact, is the first leader to argue, even before Lenin. Leon Trotsky is the leader who is arguing that the Russian proletariat would take power in Russia and there would be a socialist revolution in Russia under the leadership of Russian proletariat. And Leon Trotsky elsewhere says that this revolution, which he says would be an international revolution, would take place like this, that it would grow over from one country to few countries, from few countries to many countries, and from many countries to all over the world. He is not arguing for a simultaneous revolution in all countries. On the contrary, he is saying that revolution would start in one country, it would go over to few countries, from few countries to many countries, and from many countries to all of the countries. So to make allegation against Trotsky that Trotsky was not in favor of a revolution in one country is a false allegation. Trotsky has never argued against revolution in one country. What Trotsky is arguing that after making a revolution, that he says would be a revolution led by the working class and followed by the peasantry. This he calls a socialist revolution. And after this revolution, the question is this, the issue is this: what would be the task of the proletariat? Can the proletariat of a winning country, of a victorious country, sit inside its country to make a socialist society? Can it make a socialist society while the rest of the world is capitalist? The question is not whether there can be revolution in one country or not. This is not the question between Trotsky and Stalin. That is something that belongs to history. The revolution was already there. By the time the disputes had arose inside the international, this question was over. Russia had already made a revolution as a single country. This would be idiotic to say that there was any dispute between Stalin and Trotsky on the question of whether there can be a revolution in one country or not. In fact, it were Genovevites in the Russian Revolution who before the revolution were arguing that there cannot be socialist revolution in one country. One country cannot go socialist, and therefore they said that the task of the revolutionaries is to support the February government, not to break with it for a socialist revolution. They opposed Trotsky, and it was in their relation that Lenin said something which now Professor Rehman is attributing something against Trotsky. While opposing Zenovavites, Lenin had written these lines. I'm reading it from the text. Lenin said, "I know there are of course sages who think they are very clever and even call themselves socialists, who assert, and it is important, who assert that power shall not have been seized until the revolution had broken out in all countries." When Trotsky had argued this, that power should not have been seized unless the revolution has broken out in all countries, Trotsky has never argued that. Who had argued that? It was Zinoviev, Kamenev, who were arguing this before the revolution. And for that they were expelled from the party. They were arguing this, that no socialist revolution can be made in a single country. Trotsky was the first and foremost leader for a socialist revolution in one country. So Trotsky was not opposing the revolution in one country. Trotsky was the leading proponent of revolution in one country, socialist revolution in one country. Where Trotsky differed from Stalin, the question was different, altogether different. After Lenin's death, this question had come up before the Comintern, before the CPSU, before the Soviet government, whether there could be socialism in one country. That meant whether a socialist society can be made, whether the task of building socialism can be accomplished within the confines of one country. This was the question that was to be addressed. And in what historical conditions this question had arisen? This question had arisen after the defeats of revolution in the West. When the revolution in the West was defeated, only then this question had arrived. Had revolutions not been defeated in the West, all revolutionaries, including Lenin, Trotsky, and everybody, was clear on that there can't be revolution, there can't be socialism in one country, socialism cannot be constructed in one country, there can't be socialist society in one country. And to be sure, Stalin is not the chief proponent of socialism in one country. In fact, this doctrine before Stalin was forged by Bukharin. During the lifetime of Lenin, Bukharin had started to propose this. And we all know that Bukharin was in the right wing of the party. He was the core right winger in the party for his entire life. He was in right wing of the party. So it was Bukharin who was arguing, even in Lenin's time, that there can be socialism in one country. Lenin never supported him. But Bukharin's theory of socialism in one country was taken so lightly by all the revolutionaries, and it was ignored to that extent that there was no debate on that during Lenin's lifetime. But after Lenin's time, in fact, the failure of revolutions in Western Europe had resulted in two different consequences, giving birth to two different currents, two different responses inside the party, government, and Comintern. The faction under Lenin and Trotsky had pledged to fight this defeat of the world proletariat in the West. They had pledged to overturn this defeat and to transform it into a victory of the proletariat. They did not. They refused to accept this defeat. And they did not design their policies in accordance with this defeat, because they rejected this defeat. They said that, all right, this is episodic defeat and we will overturn it. After the revolutions were defeated in Western Europe, in Czechoslovakia, in Hungary, in two times in Germany. So Lenin and Trotsky did not capitulate, but they vowed to reverse these defeats and to go for victory. But then the right wingers inside the party, the government, and the Comintern, they capitulated to these defeats and they proposed to design the policies of the government, of the party, of the Comintern in accordance with these defeats. They adapted to these defeats. They started arguing that in this new scenario where Soviet Union is isolated after the defeats in the West, policies must be designed afresh. And they proposed that now The time is ripe to construct the wings and to work inside Soviet Union to build a socialist society. In fact, the pretext of building a socialist society, the kulaks that had grown during the operation of new economic policy and their political representation inside the party and the government, the state, the right wingers, the bureaucrats. So they started to argue that Soviet Union cannot take the burden of world revolution on its shoulders. Instead, it must grow its own socialist society. And in a long economic competition with the capitalist world, it must emerge victorious. So the whole purpose was to backtrack from the project of world socialist revolution that was prepared under the leadership of Lenin and Trotsky, and for which the Comintern was founded, Comintern was established. So it was in these conditions that Stalin resuscitated the old dead theory proposed by Bukharin at one time, the theory of socialism in one country, against the project of world socialist revolution, and made it a wholesome political project around which rest of the politics started to revolve. So this was socialism in one country. Stalin's proposed, echoing Bukharin, that a socialist society can be reared, a socialist society can be made in a single country. That means the socialist tasks, the socialist aims can be realized, they can fruition, and they can be accomplished in one country. It was impossible. It was impossible on many counts. It was impossible for the main reason that the economic forces, the economic life of the world had long ago overstepped the national frontiers. And once the national frontiers were overstepped by economic life, by the productive forces, they could not have been captured back and put within the confines of nation state, a single country. They had gone global. The global economic life could not have been put back within the narrow confines of a single country. This is what Stalinists were proposing. And the results were disastrous. Results were the destruction of the Soviet Union, its degeneration first, and then its destruction. No single country in a globalized world where productive forces and the economic life has globalized itself, it has internationalized itself, it has overstepped the boundaries of the nation states, can live and grow alone in isolation from others. Socialism means growing beyond capitalism. It was not possible. Even a capitalist development was not possible in a single country. What to say of socialist development? A socialist development needs a more integrated economic life on a global scale, a more closer interaction of all parts of the world into an economic order. But Stalinists were heading towards a disaster. This theory of socialism in one country was in fact the doctrine of the disaster. In proposing socialism in one country, in fact, Stalin was offering a peace proposal to rest of the world, rest of the capitalist world. Socialism in one country had a flip side also. Socialism in one country meant an adaptation to and acceptance of capitalism in other countries. The Soviet bureaucracy, represented by Stalinists who were the torchbearers of counter revolution against the October Revolution, they were advocates of a retreat from the offensive project of world socialist revolution. They were assuring the world bourgeoisie that they have no plans for a world socialist revolution. They are ready to act within the confines of a single country of Soviet Union, and they have no plan to overthrow the regimes in the West or elsewhere. So this was their assurance to world bourgeoisie. Other aspects which we will detail later. But at this juncture, we must first of all understand the historic roots of this doctrine of this program of socialism in one country. That was the banner of Soviet bureaucrats, Soviet bureaucracy, so the right wing inside the party and the state, and was a wholesome counter revolution against the gains of October. So this as a doctrine has raised its head inside Soviet Union after the death of Lenin. During lifetime of Lenin, it could not have gained any roots, and after that Stalinists, who had become a majority inside the government and the party, they had become the dominant factor inside party also because of the defeats of revolution in Western Europe. A thermidor had come up inside Soviet Union. The backwardness of Russia was a contributory factor to it, and the prime factor were two: the defeat of proletariat in the West, the failure of the Western revolutions, and the disintegration of the proletariat during civil war, the bloody war. All industry was destroyed, and the industrial proletariat, the forebearer of the spirit of the revolution, was disintegrated completely, and therefore the Thermidorian powers had gained momentum inside Soviet Russia. In these circumstances, this doctrine of socialism in one country had come up. Lenin, in his lifetime, has never supported socialism in one country. It is absolutely false to say that Lenin ever whispered in favor of socialism in one country. The quotes Professor Rehman is giving in favor of socialism in one country, in fact, are saying something else. When Lenin is talking of accomplishment of and the advancement of socialist revolution in the country, in fact, he is not talking of building a socialist society. He is not talking of accomplishment of socialist aims. Rather, on the contrary, more than one place, Lenin himself has repeatedly said that unless the European proletariat comes to aid of Russian proletariat, it cannot even think to establish a socialist society. Lenin said its socialist revolution would not survive if European proletariat does not come to aid of Russian proletariat. So the essential condition, not only for building socialism inside the Soviet Union, but for survival of the revolution, was the victory of socialist revolution in advanced countries. Trotsky was absolutely right in his claim, and it is here that Lenin agrees with him. that all preconditions for building of a socialist society that were absent in backward Russia were already present in the advanced West, the advanced countries of the West. So the building of socialism would start, the building of socialist society, the construction of socialist society would start from the advanced countries, though the proletariat may be taking power or in all probability may take power in the backward countries where all political contradictions that may give rise to a revolution, a massive social revolution, may be existing in the backward countries. So the proletariat of backward countries can definitely start a revolution. It can seize power at the head of a peasantry, a rebellious peasantry. It can establish its dictatorship. But in order that this dictatorship must survive, that this dictatorship must advance, must live on, it is necessary that this revolution spreads over to advanced countries. If it does not spread over to advanced countries, it cannot survive. And this is what not only Trotsky is saying, Lenin is again and again saying this. At more than one place, Lenin has said that our revolution cannot survive if the Western proletariat does not come to our aid. Lenin said that he is ready to sacrifice the Russian Revolution for the revolution in the West. He is especially quoting Germany, German Revolution. For the sake of German Revolution, he can sacrifice the revolution in Russia. Because German Revolution is more important for Lenin. So the question whether there can be socialism in one country or not, history has decisively settled today in favor of Leon Trotsky. What Leon Trotsky said, that is proved correct after a century. The claim of Stalin is that they can establish, that they can build a socialist society in a single country, the Soviet Union, has fallen flat, not only in Soviet Union, but in all countries wherever they attempted to build such a society. In China, in Vietnam, in Cuba, in North Korea, in countries of Eastern Europe. Nowhere Stalin has succeeded in building socialism even in a single country. So the history has undoubtedly, without a fragment of doubt, has endorsed the proposition advanced by Lenin and Trotsky that there cannot be socialism in one country. And as I have submitted before, that we have to understand this concept of socialism in one country and we have to segregate the two understandings on it. Socialism in one country means the building of socialist society, the construction of socialist society in one country, not the establishment of socialist power in one country. Definitely, the socialist revolution can take place in one country. We call it socialist revolution because the socialist proletariat is at the head of it, and this revolution is going to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat, followed by peasantry. Because the revolution is going to establish the dictatorship of the working class of the proletariat, that's why we call this revolution a socialist revolution. Not because this revolution is going to make a socialist society within the confines of a country where this revolution is taking place. In segregation, it cannot do that. The socialist society would be organized, would be made only after, if not all, many of the majority of the countries they fall under proletarian dictatorship. Once the proletariat takes the power, it smashes, it appropriates its own bourgeoisie, and many countries, only then it can make a socialist society, and even then, the socialist society would be made first in the advanced countries, and from there, and with the aid of those advanced countries, it would go over to backward countries, because in backward countries the prerequisites of a socialist society, and those are not only cultural prerequisites or political prerequisites, primarily they are economic prerequisites, the prosperity, the abundance of commodities, abundance of resources. That is the basic requirement, the fundamental requirement for establishment of a socialist society. And because the advanced countries are possessing this, advanced capitalist countries have achieved that level of economic development, culture, and politics, that is the essential prerequisite upon which a socialist society can be constructed. So the debate between Stalin and Trotsky must first be put on its legs. It must be understood in correct perspective. The two issues should not be intermingled. The question of revolution in one country is altogether different from the question of construction of a socialist society in one country after that revolution. These are two entirely different questions which we must address separately and distinctively. In fact, Stalinists don't understand this. They are mingling these two questions. While attacking Trotsky for his opposition to socialism in one country, they tell their followers, and they remain under a misconception themselves also, that as if Trotsky is opposing revolution in one country. No. Trotsky is opposing the claim that a socialist society can come up in an individual, isolated country. That is what Trotsky is opposing. This is the proposition of Stalinists that Trotsky is opposing. But then people like Taimur Rehman, who are claiming that they have read Trotsky, they have read everything about Trotsky, they don't understand even the bone of contention on this subject. They do not understand the disputes that were raised by Leon Trotsky against Stalin on this subject. They don't understand the controversy itself. Socialism in one country has proven itself to be the banner of a sectarian, narrow, nationalist counter-revolution against the internationalist project of socialism, of world socialist revolution. Socialism at an international scale. Taimur Rehman falsely propagates that Trotsky was against a revolution in one country, or Trotsky was propagating for an international revolution simultaneously in all countries. And he was saying that revolution cannot be made or cannot be sustained in one country. This is what Lenin was saying. You can make revolution in one country, but you cannot sustain it. To his other argument, the two-stage theory, we will come later in another video, because that is a subject which must be dealt separately, and he has made a mistake. Firstly, to deal that subject with socialism in one country, and then to reduce the arguments relating the two-stage theory to the peasant question. Peasant question is one of the questions in that, and the way Taimur Rehman has raised that question is absolutely incorrect, but we will come to that question in another video. So far as this video is concerned, we are confining ourselves to the question of socialism in one country. I think I have uh, made myself clear on that and the position of Workers' Socialist Party on that. Uh, so let us wait for the next video on the question of two-stage theory and Trotsky's opposition.